Hello, and welcome to the Unsung Cyberhero Adventures TV network. Today's show focuses on answering the question, how will a security architect apply his skills to architect a more competent, secure, and diverse cybersecurity and IT future? Stay tuned to find out. I'm your host, Gary Berman. Our mission is to shine the light on the people and organizations who keep us safe online while at work, home, and school, and to serve as a business to business networking platform for the cybersecurity and information technology communities. We've learned that 55% of human communication is nonverbal. That's why we include a video feed, so that you have the option of seeing our guests or simply to just listen. It's also why we're called a TV network. We're all about information sharing and business to business networking. You never know who you're going to connect with and how you'll be able to maximize opportunities resulting from hearing from our guests. This is especially valuable right now that the community's primary way of conducting business, conferences, has been put on hold for the foreseeable future. Our special guest today is Ron Eddings. Ron is the manager and security architect at Palo Alto Networks. As a security architect leader, he's responsible for facilitating growth for others and consistently creating a pipeline of security leaders. His team is highly effective in planning, designing, and implementing security controls for enterprise organizations. In addition, his team of security architects are leaders in creating security policies, standards, and guidelines. During implementation, his team assists enterprise organizations with detection engineering, case management, creating and automating incident response processes, creating automation via Python and JavaScript, and threat intel management. He assists organizations scale security controls while reducing complexities that analysts and engineers face, and he works closely with analysts, engineers, and enterprise stakeholders to provide production security workflows that are measurable and can grow at scale. What I love about Ron is that he's committed to consistently advocating for team success, and he considers himself to be a lifelong learner and teacher who is consistently finding ways to hone his craft in technology. And if that wasn't enough, he's the co host of Hacker Valley Studio, a great podcast. Ron, my first question is, when do you sleep?
You know that there's always an opportunity to get what you want done and also get enough sleep. So I just try to wake up early and still go to bed at a reasonable hour.
What is early for you? What time do you wake up?
Early for me is 5 a.m. So a good day I'll wake up at 5, but it's typically any time between 5 and 5:30.
You know, there are a couple of reasons that I asked that. The first of which is when I was first starting the Cyberhero Comics series, I was working with from people overseas, and I had to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and so my whole circadian rhythm is completely changed. And today I started work at 4 a.m. I don't
Wow.
advise that. Yeah.
Yeah, you actually covered everything I wanted to cover on the podcast. Thank you so much for the great introduction. But yeah, I agree. It's really interesting what it does to your circadian rhythm. I actually read a lot about that, and what I learned for me is my circadian rhythm works like it's best tuned when I go to bed around 10 and wake up extremely early, and it works out great because I work with a lot of individuals on the East Coast also.
Well, you know, there's some science to what you're saying about the circadian rhythm and coding. There was a very interesting study that's actually ongoing right now that I'll have in the show notes that looked really for the first time into the incidence of bugs and the quality of coding based upon circadian rhythms. You know, what time people start, what time they stop, how long is the optimal number of hours before, coding mistakes start going up, what are the size of teams, what are your thoughts about all that in your role as a security architect?
I think there's a lot of a lot of research that hasn't been done on that, and I agree. I think for me specifically, I'm most impactful in the morning, and in the morning it's quiet. There's not a lot of people up, especially around 5, 6 a.m. At least on the West Coast. So I have an opportunity to do the most impactful work, plan my day out, do the things that maybe I didn't get done yesterday, or work on some of the really hard problems. I learned from me and many others that working on the hardest problem first creates success for the day going forward.
So, as a best practice, one of the things that I think most of us struggle with is this notion of procrastination, of the hard problems. How did you develop or help our audience understand, how do you stay disciplined to attack the hard problems rather than, postponing them like many of us do?
Right. When I was first getting started in cybersecurity, I got a pretty early start. I'm a product of great mentors and lack of resources in cybersecurity. There weren't that many resources when I was first getting started, and the resources I'm talking about are books and YouTube videos. There's so many resources today, but back then I had to do a lot of tinkering, and that meant many headaches, many unsuccessful tests, and also learning on the job. So I kind of built this relentless mindset of kind of becoming a lifelong learner. I know that I'm not going to have all the answers overnight. So if I structure my day in the right way, I can really get what I want to get done accomplished. And it's a pretty difficult thing to build into a habit, but I think it just starts with one day at a time. Not every day I'm perfect with all of my goals or completing all of the tasks that I want to get done. But if I do it first thing in the morning, I have the highest level of success for it.
And do you make lists each day and do you color code them or what is a how does a security architect's mind work on being organized? Like what is that about?
Security architects are great with planning. I really encourage my team to always show up with a plan. And even for the podcast, I always show up with a plan. I have notes here, show notes for myself, where I made a little bio for myself to understand what I wanted my message to be today. And I think the message is always the most important for an individual and a security architect because your message is going to determine how someone perceives you, your opinion, and what you're trying to convey to the world. And for security architects, we're constantly trying to implement solutions. And these solutions might be security controls like locking a user out of their account. This is a security control or a solution that we like to implement. And we have to provide the correct message and a proper plan for others to adopt these solutions and controls that we're proposing.
That's an incredibly important and insightful thing you just said because one of the big challenges that many people face in the IT ecosystem or cybersecurity community within that is they're brilliant in many parts of the brain, but one of the skills that for a number of reasons could be is just human communication. How to message things. What would your advice to our audience be about distilling the creativity, in security and the particular genius, that people have into being able to communicate it to other people?
That's a tough question to answer. There's so many avenues and ways that you can explore becoming a better communicator and providing a great message. I had to start. My recommendation would be to start with learning how to learn, because you can try to learn about communication, but if you don't have good learning habits, it's going to be hard to retain and recall that information. So my method was I took courses on memory and reading, and
Wow.
this boosted everything. It made a lot of other kind of skills and areas of expertise that I wanted to focus on a lot more accomplishable. And I took this course by a gentleman named Jim Quick. It's called Quick Brain. And he also has a course on speed reading. And he gives very bite-sized informational chunks on how to recall and retain information better. So I use mnemonics, I use memory palaces, and other tricks like pinning people's names on their face. Communication is all about learning about someone else or learning about a group of people and then sending the message to them kind of for the best way that they can perceive it. So I would recommend starting with learning how to learn and also learning how to read. And you can expand to so many other areas outside of that, like learning about communication. and put those tools in your tool belt and have great strategies for recalling those tools and practicing them.
Well, this is especially relevant because remembering someone's name, is incredibly important. And Larry, I really want to, continue our. That was a joke, Larry. Um, by the way, I'll focus on like humor and stuff, and then you focus on cybersecurity. That way, we kind of stay in our lane.
Awesome.
But so you began to talk a little bit about some of your mentors. What was it like kind of coming up in the industry, for your experience?
Yeah, so I'm a son of cybersecurity. I kind of started out in life, playing outside and doing sports and playing with people in the neighborhood. And when I was around 13, I was introduced along with some of my friends to the internet. And immediately after being introduced, I was on AOL Instant Messenger. Me and my friends, we were in chat rooms talking about games, also talking crap to one another. And there was this person that joined one of the chat rooms and said that they were a hacker. So, of course, me being young and silly, I was like, haha, I'm a hacker too. And this person ultimately kicked me out of the chat room. And they weren't a moderator of the chat room. So I was like, what is going on? How did this happen? And I joined back in the room. I messaged the person and I started to ask them questions. And they used this capability of AOL Instant Messenger called direct message. And it allows you to share files and pictures. And this person sent me a file. It was an executable file. Of course, being young, I opened it up. And my CD tray started opening up. My computer was rebooting and everything was going wild. And luckily, persistence, having a tool being persistent on a device back then wasn't really a thing. So when I restarted my computer, this remote access tool that they gave me, it didn't load up on by default. So I reached back out to them again and I said, hey, how did you do that? I kept bugging them. How did you do it? How did you do it? And they finally told me they were using a tool called ProRat. And ProRat is one of the earlier remote access tools that allows you to send a file and perform some basic commands like open CD tray, reboot computer, overlay a message. And that's really how I got my start as like a young teen and just tinkering around. And I went back to the well. I went back to this person and said, I need to learn more. How do I learn more about what this is? I want to run different commands outside of what ProRat allows me to run. And they told me that I need to learn about Java. Again, I'm 13, 14 at this time. So learning about Java was a pretty heavy lift. I wasn't excellent in math or science or any other of those related topics that really help you learn about programming. But, I was pretty persistent and I just tried to pick up skills as I went. But I've always been great with staying in touch, asking questions, and along the way somewhere, my friend and I, we became cameramen for a public access TV channel for Anne Arundel County in Maryland. And luckily for me, a cybersecurity rock star walks in. His name is Marcus Carey. And at this point, I'm 16 or 17 years old. And Marcus, he looks at me and he says, hey, I see that you're reading this book about CCNA, Cisco Certified Networking Associate. And this was one of the first certifications that I was working towards. It was something that I read online that people were getting to get a job in IT. And Marcus was very intrigued by the fact that this teenager is reading this CCNA book. And he took me under his wing. He started providing me mentorship. But when he came into the studio that I worked at, he was wanting to record cybersecurity related content to promote information to others about cybersecurity. One of the best things about this story is Marcus Carey is also an African American man. So at this point in cybersecurity, there's not a lot of African Americans in the field. So, mentoring me is even more important. It's, spreading the word about what this field could provide, but it's also promoting diversity by bringing up the youth. So I really latched on to Marcus Carey. He taught me so much, and I was fortunate enough to continue on. when I was 19, I went to Anne Arundel Community College and I got another big break. I met a gentleman named Chad Price, and Chad Price worked at Booz Allen Hamilton. And I've always been a know-it-all. It's one of my strengths and weaknesses. And during the class, I would tell Chad, I would say, "Hey, this is wrong. You know, the book is wrong. You're wrong. All of this information is wrong. You can actually run these commands differently and ultimately get to the solution with a different route." He was impressed by my persistence and kind of just the fact that I was brave enough to provide answers. And he asked me if I wanted to apply at Booz Allen Hamilton.
Wow.
I didn't think it was possible for a 19-year-old to get a full-time job working in cybersecurity, but it was a huge break, and that was really my start and introduction to doing it professionally.
Wow, what an inspiring story, and especially right now. I mean, there are a number of important things you just elaborated on. One of which is the importance of having mentors. And in my experience, I too read a book. You know my story. I knew nothing about cybersecurity and technology, but I was a victim of a multi-million-dollar series of insider hacks. And my way to learn was to get a book called Cybersecurity for Dummies. And 10 pages in, Ron, I was lost. But there are other ways to get into cybersecurity. So maybe you can share with our audience the different kind of skill sets that the industry needs, especially right now.
The industry needs all skill sets. The world is becoming a more and more connected place. We have our refrigerators connected, we have our printers connected, we have really everything connected. And pretty soon, maybe Elon Musk will figure out a way to get our minds connected and transmitting information over the internet. So I think that when we're looking at diversity in thought and all of the types of individuals that we need in cybersecurity, we really need everyone that has a creative idea on design and security to provide their thoughts to the cybersecurity space. I've worked with individuals that have former lives in the military, being police officers. I've even now working with artists now that I've been working at startups. Some of the marketing experts that I work with, they have a background in artistry and they ultimately learn more and more about cybersecurity along the way. And they provide more of a unique thought about how we can holistically provide security to everything that's connected.
And right now, I mean, given the excuse me, the Black Lives Matter movement and this sea change that the country is experiencing in a good way, what would your counsel be to the cybersecurity community about diversity and inclusion?
My message is leave no stone unturned, leave no conversation kind of in an open state. Let's address every conversation that's out there. And what I mean by that exactly is we try to create these divisions, between work and life, and that's great. I think there needs to be some sort of division, but ultimately you need to have conversations with the individuals that you work with if you want to keep on moving forward. And it's so important that we bring in people of other ethnicities, of other backgrounds, of other walks of life to have more diverse conversations so we're not stuck in the same rut of just talking about security engineering or threat intelligence. How can we also talk about learning to promote diversity in thought? How can we include even the young people, the people that are in high school and college? How do we bring them into the conversation? Because they're ultimately going to be the ones working with us in the future. And when we're looking even further in the future, they're going to be the ones that are promoting change going forward. So I look at it as we need to have the conversation about all of the technical pieces, but also we need to start bringing some more of the soft skills, like bringing in auditoriums to the workplace and provide diversity in speakers and diversity in leaders. I know organizations like Netflix, they do a great job at it. Palo Alto Networks also does a great job at, uh, you know, starting the conversation about diversity and inclusion, sending people polls and getting some feedback about what is the state of how people feel. Can they provide that feedback in an anonymous way? So I think there's so many things to do. I don't think there's one right answer for promoting diversity and inclusion, but I think it's all about starting the conversation and really leaving no conversation unturned.
And interestingly, speaking of not leaving things sort of unturned or untried, one of the interesting things about the cybersecurity ecosystem and the people in it, there's this overwhelming desire to be helpful. And I have found exactly what you have described, that people have been incredibly generous with their time and their consideration and to teach people. These are the helpers of the world. And you are a precise example of why we're doing this show, the unsung cyberhero adventures. Because the only time you hear about cybercrime is when the bad people win. What
Right.
about all the people who toil in anonymity to keep us safe? So, a shout out to you and everyone like you, for what you do. One of the things I'd love to hear from you is, can you share, a case study, real life cybercrime? If you have to blind it, that's cool. But kind of, what happened? What were the consequences, and what were the lessons learned?
Well, with me and being a security architect and also leading security architects, we don't necessarily work with the individuals that are finding the O days or finding the hackers and catching them red-handed. We work with the CISO, the directors, and we stop these things from happening over and over again. So more of my war stories are misconfigurations, like having some type of external drive that's you think is only available to your internal employees, but it's open to the world. I've seen a lot of misconfigurations when it comes to databases, uh, shared drives, and even applications. Sometimes, unfortunately, we have these bright ideas as security experts. Hey, we're going to create this really awesome security control to find all of the bad guys more immediately. But that security control that we put in place is vulnerable itself. So not only are we using this centralized place to bubble up security events, but the attackers are able to attack that device and see all of the information in it. So ultimately, any security incident that you get, the hacker knows about. It's almost like if you have a breach in your organization, do you send emails to your colleagues and let them know that you have been breached? That might be a bad idea just because if our web server, or I mean, sorry, if our email server is vulnerable or the service that we're using for email is vulnerable, now the attacker's tipped off. You just tipped off the attacker that you've been breached, you know about it, and the attacker knows about it. Everyone knows, so the attacker is able to pivot. I see more of those types of situations.
Wow, I mean, if the stakes were not so serious, this is incredibly cool. I
Right.
mean, it's like a real life video game, but the consequences are devastating. For many people. So at Palo Alto Networks, like, what's the coolest thing that you do?
The coolest thing that I do is I play a constant game of tower defense. I'm moving pieces around on a game board constantly. And my game pieces are firewalls, they're the SIM. I deal a lot with endpoint solutions. So I am constantly creating these workflows. They're almost like a Visio diagram. It's taking a security incident from step A to step Z, and I get to do this with software and also through code. So I'm somewhat of an artist and somewhat of a kind of tedious implementer. So I get to move around these security solutions, provide feedback, and let organizations and users know that if you implement it this way, there's going to be problems. But we have best practices. We have things that have been proven by track record, and you can even reference our other customers and ask them about it to confirm that this is going to be your best solution. So I'm constantly creating a picture and playing a game of tower defense against the attacker so they are not able to breach our customers.
What's it like dealing with C-level people, the CISOs and the like? I mean, um, they all now understand, the importance of cybersecurity. I mean, what is their bottleneck? Are they struggling to get the attention of the board, or how's all that going dealing with C-level people?
There's a lot of things that could be limiting, like budget and also time. And these are two things that often don't work to one's advantage. You have to really kind of understand what are your needs and pick out what's going to most uh, satisfy those needs immediately. From my experience working with C-suite and directors, it comes down to, what resources do we have? Do we have the budget to hire more people? Do we have the budget to bring in more security solutions? And this is a problem that all industries face when it comes to cybersecurity, because if you don't have the budget, resources, or time, who's gonna look into the cases or the alerts of interest? Where I come in is I try to provide a high level layer of expertise where I can provide you with understanding of what security solutions will help you most, along with assisting with the implementation. So I assist my customers with their engineering needs. I assist them with their architecture needs also, if they need a high level plan about what needs to be in place and where it all needs to go. But ultimately, at the end of the day, the customer still needs someone to maintain that body of work. And that's where your engineers come into place. Engineers are expensive, cybersecurity is hot. People are bouncing from one industry or one organization to another. So I think another challenge for the CISO and directors are retaining your talent, especially the ones that really understand the goals of the organization and the challenges that technology puts in front of you.
Yeah, I mean, the notion of the movement, of people from one company to the next. I mean, then the CISO, the company just has to start over, right? And that cannot be efficient. And I have read that in an enterprise, they might have 50 or 75 or 100 different solutions in their security stack, and maybe don't even know if they're interoperable or not. I mean,
Right.
maybe you can explain all about that.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a great video I was watching a few days ago. I can't recall the speaker that was kind of driving the video, but the main topic was visibility in your organization. And I think visibility is always key. So the most troubled organizations that I've dealt with have no visibility on what are their high level requirements. What are the things that their organization needs to be sure that are safe to continue business. That's one thing. And then another aspect of visibility is, where are all of my applications? Where are all of my users and all of their devices? Do I have accountability on where those things are at and what those things are able to access? I think visibility, when looking at it, is a great place to start for any organization in need or any organization that wants to adopt or further expand their security stack.
Palo Alto Networks has been an industry leader, for a long time. What attracted you to the company?
Well, I actually had a interesting journey into Palo Alto Networks. I was working at Intel Corporation doing corporate security for them. I was a threat intel analyst, along with I was also kind of serving the role as a security engineer too. So I was defining our threat intel needs and building out the program through engineering practices. And from there, it was really interesting. I was doing a lot of automation, but I felt like I wasn't able to scale my skills. I wasn't able to scale the impact that I had on the industry. So I started to decide that I wanted to work at a startup. And I went through this really methodical approach of trying to find the right company. So I went on this website called Crunchbase, and it allows you to see what startups have received funding and who has given them funding. So I went to this site and I signed up for a premium subscription for around $40. And this subscription allowed me to search which companies in San Jose, California have $30 million in funding, because I need to get paid, $30 million in funding, and have 50 or less employees and that are focused on cybersecurity. And once I did this search, only 10 companies popped up. It was,
Yeah,
and
but
one of the
that
top,
is so brilliant. I mean, that's such a security architect thing to do, isn't it?
it is. Define the plan first. And from there, I found 10 companies. The company that stood out most was a company called Demisto. And Demisto does security orchestration and automation, along with helping organizations with case management. This was pretty much a dream come true for me because I was building a security automation framework at Intel, and I wanted to scale my skills and my impact in in the community. So it just made perfect sense to apply to Demisto. Once I applied, the co-founders were shocked. They were like, "How did you find us? We're like in we're barely out of stealth mode. It doesn't make sense." And I was like, "Hey, I have this, little strategy. I found you guys on Crunchbase." And we had a great journey. I was around employee number 30 there. I was at that company for about a year and a half, and we were ultimately acquired by Palo Alto Networks.
Oh, so that's how you became part of Palo Alto Networks.
That's right.
And so what is that like? I mean, you don't realize a company's or an organization's culture either, until you go into it or you leave one. What was it like, coming from that startup environment to this, kind of giant in the industry?
Yeah, that's a great question. Intel, I feel like really prepared me to adopt well into Palo Alto Networks. Uh, the transition from Intel to Demisto was kind of a culture shock. I was working around the clock with individuals in the United States and also Tel Aviv, and this structure in our company allowed us to continually move the product forward 24/7. And it's the same thing with Palo Alto Networks, but it's a bigger company. We have more structure and policies in place, which is great for me coming from a big company like Intel. So I think Intel really prepared me for this transition back into a bigger organization. I love it. And it also has provided me the opportunity to manage a team. After we joined Palo Alto Networks, we were required to scale what Demisto, which is now called XOR, could do. So I had to build a team from the ground up. I hired around 8 excellent security architects, and we've just been hitting the ground running ever since.
Well, I've never had a scoop, but I would like you to give me a scoop that you have somewhere in your security architecture tower brain that you want to be the CEO of the company. You can say
uh,
it.
it's you never know what happens. I'm open to anything. My goal and purpose in cybersecurity and in life is to really be a lifelong learner and teacher and to provide impact. And if it meant being the CEO of a company like Palo Alto Networks, I'd be happy to stand up and take that shot.
Well, you heard it here first. Our first scoop. Ron, thank you so much for this incredible conversation. Is there anything else that you'd like to add, to amplify your mission?
Yeah, absolutely. My mission is also to uncover what helps and promotes the leaders and practitioners in cybersecurity to become successful. And that's one of the reasons why Chris and I started the Hacker Valley Studio podcast. So, outside of Palo Alto Networks and being a security architect, I'm also driven to uncover the story, just like yourself, Gary, about what makes people so great. So I would love for anyone to, stay in contact with me reach out, whether it's about security architecture or some of the things that we talked about earlier, like learning how to become a better learner. Whatever it is, I'm here to help and teach. And one of the phrases I live by is when you teach something, you get to learn it twice.
Which is a great mission and a great philosophy from a great guy. You truly are a real life unsung cyber hero. Thanks for what you do. And we'll have information to contact Ron in our show notes, as well as a couple of the links. Maybe you can forward the other links of that you were talking about earlier in the show about memory and mnemonics and things like that. That would be great. So thanks again, Ron. And if you would like to be a guest on our show, just send an email to me at Gary at cyberheroes with an S, comics with an S.com. And we hope this helps. Have a great day.
Thanks for having me, Gary.